Welcome back. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy meeting with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen yesterday in the face of China's aggressive warnings. Watch this.
I believe our bond is stronger now than at any time or point in my lifetime. The one thing I would say to China, too, at no time, I am the Speaker of the House. There's no place that China is going to tell me where I can go or who I can speak to, whether you be foe or whether you be friend. I'm not the general manager of the Houston Rockets.
China responding this morning, vowing to take, quote, forceful measures in response to the serious wrongdoing of US-Taiwan colluding together. Joining me right now is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He is a member of the Senate Armed Services, Judiciary, Intelligence, and Joint Economic Committees. He's also author of the book, Only the Strong. Senator, thanks very much for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me back, Maria.
I thought that was an interesting comment from Kevin McCarthy. I'm not the general manager of the Houston Rockets, talking about how some of these sports leagues have basically gotten in bed with communist China. What is your reaction to this aggressiveness from communist China to McCarthy's meeting with the president of Taiwan?
Well, I want to commend Speaker McCarthy, not just for meeting with President Tsai, but also bringing a large bipartisan delegation to meet with her. I think it sends a strong signal to the Chinese communists that at a time when many issues divide Republicans and Democrats, standing with Taiwan against Chinese communist aggression unites us. So, I know that in the meeting yesterday, they talked about having more weapons delivered and doing more training with the Taiwanese military. I think these are fruitful steps that both parties want to pursue. Hopefully, President Biden will agree with the congressional wing of his party that we need to take every step right now to deter Chinese communist aggression against Taiwan.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, because that was my next question. What can you do in terms of congressional moves right now? Because I know that there's a whole list of armament that was already contracted, agreed upon, that was going to Taiwan, and they still have not gotten that. What else can be done to ensure that the CCP does not invade Taiwan sooner rather than later?
Well, first, Maria, we do need to accelerate the delivery of weapons. We've seen what Western weapons in well-trained soldiers' hands can do in Ukraine. Taiwan is different, though. Although it'll be a tougher military operation for the Chinese communists to launch an amphibious assault against Taiwan, it'll also be much harder to resupply Taiwan, since the Chinese communists can put a blockade around it. That's why it's critical we supply them now. Second, we can significantly increase our training of the Taiwanese defense forces. We already have some programs in place, but I would suggest that we significantly expand them. Again, we've seen what happens in Ukraine after they've had 8 years of training with NATO forces since 2014, when Russia first invaded. And third, President Biden needs to forcefully oppose any Chinese aggression. There have been reports, for instance, this morning, that the communist Chinese may try to inspect ships going through the Taiwan Strait. Right. Well, I would suggest that we should immediately send U.S. Navy ships through the Taiwan Strait to make it clear that we will oppose any efforts to limit freedom of navigation on the seas or in the airs, just like we should be doing, for instance, in the Black Sea with Russia.
Yeah, but look at what China is doing. They want to appear as some kind of a power broker. Just today, they're bringing the Saudis and the Iranians together in that first meeting. And then they've also obviously tried to appear as some kind of a power broker between Ukraine and Russia as well. The issue of trade with the United States comes up, and I've been talking about this most favored nation status for some time. Would you be pursuing, perhaps reversing China's most favored nation status? Why do they get all of these breaks in terms of trade with America?
Indeed, Maria, I've long had legislation that would revoke China's permanent most favored nation status. Suffice to say, they are not a favored nation in my eyes. There are other steps we can take as well to make sure that China is treated as a fully developed economy in international organizations. China has been taking advantage of the United States and the international trading system going back decades now. It's time that we put an end to it, not just to protect our jobs and our industries here in America, but to prevent China from gaining access to more technology, even more economic prosperity that they in turn just funnel into the People's Liberation Army and their intelligence services.
Yeah, I mean, the corporate sector needs to get the memo on this, particularly those investors who are pushing their clients to invest in Chinese companies that may very well be tied to the Chinese Communist Party and military. Fox News' correspondent Peter Doocy pressed the White House Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday about the intelligence captured by the Chinese spy craft that spent a week flying across the United States. Watch this exchange.
Why did President Biden say about the China spy craft in February, we were able to protect sensitive sites against collection, if that's not true?
I'm not going to confirm any reporting.
Not reporting. The DNI said today that the U.S. does not appear to have provided critical new insights to the People's Republic of China. So is it they didn't provide any new critical insights, or they didn't get anything?
I would refer you to the ODNI if you have specific questions.
Senator, she's dodging the questions. Were they sending information back in real time as that surveillance balloon hovered above our military installations?
Well, Maria, I think it's fair to say that balloon wasn't just joyriding all across the United States. This is an example, though, of Joe Biden's weakness towards China that just emboldened them to take more actions against the United States, Taiwan, or other friends. I can tell your viewers exactly what happened with this balloon. China sent a spy balloon to America. We had it in our sights over the Aleutian Islands. We had 4 aircraft in the sky armed. All they had to do was press the proverbial trigger, and they never got the order because Joe Biden didn't want to take any action that he feared would be deemed provocative by the Chinese communists. I suspect if a couple ranchers and an amateur photographer in Montana hadn't spotted that balloon, we would have never even known about it publicly because the Biden administration wanted to continue forward with business as usual with China. All that does is embolden the Chinese communists even more.
That is unbelievable, really, Senator. Meanwhile, let's talk about this 2 systems of justice. No comment whatsoever from the White House on the influence peddling that's in plain sight. And yet former President Trump was indicted, arrested. He's pled not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records Tuesday in New York City. You've said this indictment should be dismissed immediately. Tell us more.
Well, Maria, it's unprecedented in American history that the party in power would target a former president with criminal charges. Such a step should not be taken lightly, but Alvin Bragg's indictment of Donald Trump is a joke. First off, all the so-called crimes appear to be beyond the 5-year statute of limitations. Second, if you look at it as a matter of law, Alvin Bragg didn't even allege an underlying felony, which is necessary. I guess everybody says it's a federal election crime, but the Federal Election Commission didn't even pursue it, much less Alvin Bragg's predecessor, the Department of Justice. Third, consider the evidence here for this so-called crime. You have a woman who has contradicted herself multiple times about these facts, and you have a man who wasn't just convicted of a felony, he was convicted of lying under oath. Not exactly strong evidence in a court of law. And while you pointed out the 2 systems of justice, I would note that Hillary Clinton's campaign was fined over $100,000 for falsifying records for the Steele dossier. And where was that campaign based? It was in New York City, Maria. So where are the criminal charges against Hillary Clinton and her campaign?
That's a great point. So she pays for the dossier. She comes up with all these lies against Trump. Isn't that election interference right there? It was that campaign money.
Yeah, but surprisingly, there's no charges against Hillary Clinton, even though she has confessed that they falsified their campaign reports. They characterized as legal expenses what was really dirty opposition research that produced the fake Steele dossier to try to swing the 2016 election. That's just one reason or one example of how this is a political witch hunt. Another one is that you're not going to have another hearing until December, Maria. I mean, it's early April, and this is a relatively straightforward, factually simple case. I think this is primarily about pushing these proceedings into our nominating season and then ultimately into the general election.
That is a great point. Senator, thanks very much for being here this morning. We'll keep following your work.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, sir. Tom Cotton joining us.